Hello and welcome to the Raw Fork podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Marina Buksov, and I'm a functional medicine pharmacist in New York, as well as an integrative health coach and clinical herbalist. I'm pleased to go into season 3 of this podcast and continue to bring on other holistic minded pharmacists, as well as healthcare professionals to the show. I'm constantly inspired by my guests and their stories and love sharing their points of view with you all. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Raw Fork podcast. I am super excited today. I have with me Dr. Donna Mazzola, and she is an autoimmune specialist and functional medicine pharmacist. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here today.
Yeah, super, excited about what we'll talk about today. And why don't you just start with, in your own words, talking about where you grew up and where and why you went to pharmacy school?
Yeah, so actually, I was born and raised in the Detroit area. My parents immigrated over here. There was a lot of opportunity in Detroit with Motor City. So born here and never left. And honestly, I love it. People who are from Detroit know that you just a sense of pride and you're proud to be here from here. So I why I went to pharmacy school. Well, to be honest, my dad is a pharmacist. He actually, when he came to this country, he didn't speak in English, and he went back to pharmacy school at the age of 36 and graduated when he was 40. So he's actually my
Wow.
inspiration. Yeah, I mean, obviously, education is a big deal for me and for my family. And I chose to follow in my father's footsteps and kind of pursue that same career. I mean, I was good at chemistry, loved it. I was interested in it. That aligned as well. And honestly, there's just so many career opportunities within pharmacy. I think that that's something that's overlooked, that it's not just being in a retail setting, that there's so much more beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of us going into it kind of like are exploring what would be our ideal setting. So, what did you feel like in pharmacy school? Like, what was your what did you like? Maybe what didn't you like about pharmacy school as you were going through it? And what career paths did you think you were going into? And then what did you do after graduating?
Yeah, so pharmacy school, obviously the first 2 years you're drowning in the books. But then, you get to third and fourth year and you have a little bit more clinical exposure. And I think at that time is when I realized that the ambulatory care or outpatient setting was really what interested me. Quite honestly, I hated inpatient. And a lot of it, not that it wasn't interesting, and I learned a lot and I saw some really cool cases, but I couldn't get past the fact that a patient would come in with one problem, but they had 10 other ones, and we just kind of patched up that one issue and sent them out so that they could just follow up with their primary care. But we never knew if they followed up, we never knew what happened with them. Like, there was no transitions of care that occurred, and there was no connecting the dots. So that just didn't sit well with me. So I wanted to be on the other side of it in the outpatient setting. So actually, after pharmacy school, I graduated and worked retail for about 9 months. But during that time, I realized that I need to do more. I want to do more. I actually went through an accelerated program, so I finished in August. So it was kind of off kind of timing to start a residency, but I knew that I still wanted to pursue that route. And so I applied for residencies and ended up completing a residency, a PGY1 residency at the Detroit Medical Center. And it was, a general practice residency, but I was able to tailor half of my rotations to be focused in ambulatory care, where I was able to rotate through COVID clinics and HIV clinics and geriatrics clinics, and so diabetes clinics. So I kind of got the gamut of it, and I loved it. And so when I completed that, I joined with the Henry Ford Health System medication therapy management pharmacy team. And that was in 2008. So they had just started MTM, and MTM was just beginning, and a lot of the rules from Medicare around it were just starting. I mean, it started in 2006, actually. And so I got to join in on that right as they were creating it, being part of collaborative practice agreements. We were managing patients with cholesterol and diabetes, asthma. We had several, so we were placed in clinics and managed those patients for those family medicine and internal medicine doctors. So it was great. It was tons of fun. But I didn't like the aspect of it that, these patients, yes, they enrolled because they wanted to, right? So nothing is forced, it's optional. However, the fact that everything was so focused on medication, I was dealing with diabetics who I realized had no idea what a carbohydrate was, or somebody with high cholesterol that says, well, I'm taking a pill so I can eat what I want. Like, it doesn't matter. So those are all the things that were just so eye-opening to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, something's not right here. Like, this is not the focus. And to realize that these people have had these diseases for so many years and they've progressed, and no one has ever had that kind of conversation with them. That's kind of what segued me to start to read more and pursue, other areas of, I guess, what you would call medicine, but really of wellness and just overall care and nutrition. And so it's kind of took me down a different path of just learning. But, I maintained working. I stayed there for about 8 years, and I've dabbled in the insurance side of it and the inpatient side, the ambulatory side. So I've kind of seen all the areas of pharmacy where you could work. And, it kind of led me down just this passion more so than anything. That's where, DrAutoimmunegirl is. And so I actually went back to school to get a master's in nutrition back in 2011, but then I got a promotion. And so I was like, okay, let me pause and go get my MBA. So I did that for 2 years. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going back to school. I'm done. This was way too much, and I had a little one at home at the same time. But then in 2015, I was actually diagnosed with Hashimotos, which is an autoimmune disease. And that's what took me right back to square one, because I couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that I got diagnosed with autoimmune disease, where I truly did eat healthy, I exercised, at least from what I thought, I was maintaining this healthy lifestyle. So how could I get an autoimmune disease? Like, that just baffled me. And that's nothing we ever learned about in pharmacy school. Like, it's just, yep, you're predisposed to it, so you're going to get it. But that's not really how it works, So I actually then was like, I started reading around on the internet, finding all kinds of random information. I didn't know what I could trust, what I couldn't trust. So I went back to school. I was like, you know what, I'll just go learn it for myself, and I'll learn how to take care of myself and treat myself. And as I'm doing that, I will share my learnings so that other people can feel empowered to do the same. And so that's when I embarked on pursuing a master's degree in human nutrition and functional medicine. So that's finally, I graduated this past summer with that degree. But as I started that, thank you. So as I went to pursue that degree, that's when I started my blog and my page, and where I share my information.
Yeah, awesome. That's such a great page. I'll definitely link to that in the show notes. So can you tell us a little bit more about this disease, like what it affects, and what was your biggest takeaway from school? And is this something that you were able to heal yourself, or is this an ongoing process?
Yeah, so I mean, all autoimmune diseases can be an ongoing process. They are an ongoing process. And it's not that just because your genetics say so, then that's the end all be all. A lot of times when you're actually reached a diagnosis, though, it's kind of too late to go back. So there's been, with Hashimoto specifically, there's been enough damage done to the gland that you most likely will need a medication to kind of support the production of hormones, right? So you're supplementing with some, and you may have some residual um, effect from your actual thyroid gland. But what I found is that diet and nutrition and exposure to toxins, just environmental factors in general that can impact hormones, disrupt hormones, those all play a role. So it's not just to say, okay, I got this disease, I'm going to take this thyroid hormone replacement and I'll be fine, I'll feel so much better. Because so many patients that I talk to have said, I've started on meds, but I feel the same. I don't feel anything different. I don't think it's working, whatever it may be. But the reality of it, like, you got to consider nutrient deficiencies, which so many Americans are, or, considering the standard American diet, which is highly processed, high in sugars. Those all impact not only the development of autoimmune disease, but the progression of it. And I'm talking now in general, just not even beyond Hashimoto's, but they're all the same. They all kind of play that same role. But you can pull your disease back, and a lot of people say pull it back into remission, where you're controlling the inflammatory process, so that you delay that progression. That's the end goal, right? So like, if you're going to live to 90, do you want to be on the maximum dose today when you have this many years left to live? Like, what are you going to do then? So if we can delay that progression, maintain ourselves on the least possible effective dose, control, our diet and our environmental exposures and factors, then yes, you will feel better, and you'll delay that. You almost, yes, there's flare-ups here and there, but you'll almost, forget you have that disease, and it just becomes part of a lifestyle. So that's the end goal with that. But, with my learnings in school, I mean, I learned so much more that supplements what I learned and what I know from pharmacy school. And so that's kind of my stance, is not to say that it's functional or alternative medicine 100%, or that it's conventional 100%, that there's a balance, and that we have to create that balance, and that you can use conventional medicine, but you can support it. They support each other, really. And considering all those functional medicine facets that I talked about, and when you balance the two, you actually, end up with a much more positive result in the end, rather than trying to do extreme one way or the other.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because sometimes I think we are taught to be polarized in our thinking, and just like either be pro one thing and then totally condemn the other thing. But if you learn to kind of take the positives and the negatives, the pros and cons of each side, you can actually come to a really nice balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's my ultimate, goal of it. Because I mean, I have, other followers or friends, that I've connected with, and they're very one-sided about it. But that's not my outlook on it. I think there's a place for both. And we just have to learn how to use the best of both worlds. And if we can do that, then, it makes things so much easier, and, leads you down, positive outcomes, right? A road of positive outcomes.
Yeah, I think what you said before is really important too, about building habits and consistency, and having that be part of a lifestyle. So to have a healthy life, you need to develop certain habits, certain diets, certain, decrease exposure to toxins when possible, and kind of like have that be your mindset, that this is the stuff you can control, so this is the stuff you control, and then right, the stuff that's outside of your control, you either have to supplement with something, whether it's a pharmaceutical or not, and then like that's how you develop health. Like, it's an active and ongoing process. It's not a here's your solution and the magic pill and now your problems go away. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And I will add to that, is that even when you think you have all the answers, so I went to school, I learned all this, I still go through periods where I lose control of my disease and where I can feel it, and I have experienced different side effects. And even at those times where I'm like, I'm doing everything right, like what went wrong? And it's frustrating, but then it takes you down this new path of discovery to try to figure out what happened, what went wrong. And so it's ongoing. But as you said, is maintaining that healthy lifestyle will, probably 8 times out of 10, I say, like 80% of the time, keep things moving the right way. But those things can happen, and we just unfortunately don't know everything, right? We're continuously learning.
Yeah. And something else you mentioned about using conventional medicine, it's like you want to use the lowest effective dose, right? You don't want to max out your dose, so now you don't have anywhere to like progress to. Like you said, you don't have a step B or an option B to look forward to. You're just like completely exhausting all your options and hoping for the best in option A, and that's doesn't always work. You need like a backup plan too. So sometimes I think we need to remember that like there's a baseline pyramid, and like we do all this stuff in the base, in the foundation, and then like we build our way up to see like what is the least effective dose of X, Y, and Z to keep you overall feeling healthy, and not exhausting all our eggs, not putting all our eggs in one box, and not exhaust all our options all at once, but kind of build that foundation and have a plan that you step through. And just because you're maybe at step 2 doesn't mean you forget about all the stuff in step 1. You're continuously doing all the stuff in step 1, and then like you're adding things on top of that. And I think that's sometimes when we're patients or practitioners, like we don't focus on the lower hanging fruit, and we just like tend to skip them, or once we are past that stage, we like skip over them rather than emphasizing the need to always be on those.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. And it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight, so that's another thing that I think I've learned too through the years, is that there's not like a magic diet that's going to turn things around overnight, or a magic pill. There's not, you're going to remove all toxic things in your home and think it's going to turn things around. It takes time. And people are like, oh, I can't do all that. I mean, I've been at this for 5 years and still haven't gotten to exactly where I want to be with everything, so it takes time, and it's a change, but it's something that almost you have to just decide you want to commit to. And when you make that commitment, you just stick to it and build upon it. And in time, it comes. And I feel like once you start to feel better, you want to continue to do more and build upon those habits and that lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, like you mentioned before, it seemed like a lot of things to do and a lot of steps and like a lot of work. So sometimes it may be just a little bit easier to go to that supplement or that pharmaceutical, and it just comes to that choice. And I don't think there should be judgment behind it. It's just, like what is going to make you the happiest and healthiest? Is it like doing all the work and driving yourself crazy? Is it just taking the least effective dose of something? You kind of have to decide for yourself what is a good balance for you personally, that you will feel good in your body with your decisions and your outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. And what's funny is I talk to other people, and they're like, people who are set in their ways that know it has to be, functional medicine is terrible, and we need to focus on all these alternative ways. But the reality is, and from my experience having done MTM and worked in retail and just communicating with patients, is that people might want to try alternative methods or lifestyle changes or diet, but they also still want that pill. and that's okay. And so you have to meet people halfway. And so anybody being approached from an extreme, coming at somebody from an extreme approach is not going to lead to success. And so, making those small changes while still kind of holding on to your pharmaceutical is okay. It's like that crutch that people have and they want. And maybe at some point, then yes, we realize, okay, I've lost this much weight, I've done X, Y, Z, I can either get off certain things, I can lower doses. Like that's the goal. And so to try to go at it from an extreme perspective and 100% never leads to success. That's what I've found in clinical practice and personally, even with myself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always like nice to have that one step forward that you can take, but not overwhelm yourself with like all these other things that you've been missing out on, and like start to blame yourself and doubt things and then just give up in frustration. So it's nice to have like a support system and a plan, and then just take it one step at a time to the plan.
Right.
So I know you mentioned overall environmental toxicity. So can you talk a little bit about that and how that affects our immune function and autoimmune processes? And also, what do you think would be a possible solution that we can think about globally and personally?
Yeah, so environmental factors are a huge problem. And we talk about, and some of it we can't control. So if I just talk about the air that we breathe, um, the water contamination, the soil that our food is grown in, even if it says organic, like how organic is it? And is it being grown next to crop that's not organic? And therefore, those chemicals are seeping through the soil and then in through the plant and through our produce. So that's just looking at the outside. I mean, then you have to consider the chemicals that are put in processed foods, the colorings that are used in candy or cereals or whatever it may be to attract kids to want to eat it. You think about your laundry detergents, shampoos, soap, personal care products, that you're putting on your skin that's seeping through. I mean, so the exposure to toxins is unreal. I mean, what the amount that we're seeing and what is the impact of that? That's the real question. And I mean, so many of these toxins are hormone disrupting chemicals. And so, your body's hormones are like the messengers. They're like the communicators. They communicate with each other. And when there's a disruption in that pathway, then you have, that communication process now is broken, right? And so when you have chemicals that maybe, like for instance, that may act like estrogens, right? And so your body thinks you have this overabundance of estrogen, but it's not real estrogen. It's just chemicals that are attaching to your receptors. And then now you have all this estrogen in the blood. So you're getting all these symptoms of too much estrogen. And that's just one example. But like our hormone pathways are all intertwined and interconnected. And even if you think about your thyroid function and the amount of people that have thyroid disorders, you have to question like what is the impact of all this environmental toxicity that we're exposed to, because it has a direct impact on our hormones. And so, yeah, it's like, how do you control it? How do you, because some of it you can't control and some of it you can. And I think the focus has to be on the actual burden of toxicity. So, your body is amazing, quite honestly, and its ability to detoxify what's put into it and eliminate, it's powerful and it has that ability to do it. But the question is, how do you limit the exposure as much as you can? So control what you can control so that your body can control what you can't control. That makes sense. So, your liver is going to detoxify. It has phase 1 metabolism, phase 2 metabolism, and then it has elimination. And so eating, ensuring you have, your adequate nutrient intakes, B vitamins, making sure that you're getting nutrients, number one, from food. If you can't, even through supplementation, it's not a bad thing, to make sure that you're boosting the body's ability to actually metabolize. And then eating the rainbow, I always say, eat the rainbow, because that's ensuring that you have all those phytonutrients to be able to attach to all those toxins that have been broken down and then get rid of them. And then making sure that you're drinking enough water, that you're actually going to the bathroom every day, because if you're not, what's going to happen? Like, people don't want to talk about pooping, but, let's talk about it, because if you're not going, all of that hard work that you've done is just recirculating into your body. And so when I hear people tell me that I go to the bathroom once every 3 days, I about fall out of my chair, because I'm like, oh my gosh, can you imagine? That's waste. That's waste that just gets recirculated into your body. And then now that toxin exposure builds up. So it's the burden, right? So you want to control what you can by utilizing clean skincare, by ensuring you have a water filter, by buying organic. So you kind of find those things that you can control. Yes, we can't control pollution, the air that we're breathing 100%, but that's okay, because you're exposed to those chemicals, and your body should be able to do that part, as long as you're supporting it from the other side to be able to do that. So I think that there's this, again, not being extreme about it, right? Thinking about it scientifically and understanding that, yeah, our body it's amazing what it's capable of doing, but unfortunately mankind has overwhelmed it. So we have to take a step back and reduce that burden so that it can continue to do what it needs to do. And then in the end, we do our part as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are great suggestions. I think on a personal level, the power does lie with our, what we can do, like you were mentioning, for our bodies and our personal homes and personal care products and what we choose to ingest and things like that. But also the power lies in our wallets. So if we do want to affect change on a larger scale, we need to show the companies, what companies we support by buying into those companies. So B Corps that are zero emissions, or at least, or more green companies, and researching what they're doing and how they're lowering emissions, or basically using the power of the dollar and choosing and driving the market towards what we want to see more of. So we almost have to be proactive and take pay higher prices today for those kind of things and invest in our future, so that in the future, those are the companies that end up setting a new standard, a new industry standard that everybody strives to, that basically helps our nature and our environment kind of detox also, just like our livers. Our nature can regenerate and replenish, but if we keep on driving all these pollution and waste driven actions that we've been doing, it's hard for nature to undo that quickly enough. So I think if we work together with the power of our dollar, and with all these support the companies that are trying to affect change on this level, I think that's the way to kind of drive the future, and on a more global scale. So obviously, as an individual, maybe the power of your wallet isn't going to make a dent, but overall, I think companies always study habits of what consumers are wanting. So overall, our little drops in the bucket hopefully will add up over this next couple of years, and maybe something will shift. And I think that power lies in our choices as a consumer.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, something has to change, and it shouldn't be so hard. That's what I always say. It shouldn't be so hard, and I think a lot of it starts with just knowledge. So I think, so yes, the power of the dollar, but in addition, spreading awareness, because I think many people are not aware. They don't know, and where we may be embedded in this because we live it and we breathe it and we study it. Most people, it's a surprise to them, and they're not aware of the impact that's, going on from an environmental standpoint and how that impacts us and nature and the future. So I think bringing awareness to that is also really key.
Yeah, and just the sheer amount of cases that we're seeing of all these diseases, and like, all these functional medicine and alternative approaches and conventional, like, we're all trying to do the same thing with these approaches, which is just improve somebody's health and well-being and happiness, purpose, and, improve their quality of life. But we almost can't do it 100% because of these factors that we can't control that we mentioned. So it's like something does have to change on a global scale for us to be seeing much better results and that affect much more people. Because what we do is like basically individualized work on a one-to-one case basis. And then like the education is good too, but something does really have to change in order for there to be greater change that affects more people overall. But I want to go back to the education piece for a second. And I know that you said that you love learning, and for your family education is very important. And also for pharmacists in general, I feel like we all love learning. And that's why a lot of us are learning all these different modalities as well. But why exactly did you want to learn it for yourself when you got a diagnosis, rather than go to like doctors or functional medicine experts or anybody else that already maybe had that knowledge?
I think that's just my personality. I need to know, if somebody tells me something and it's something new to me. So it was completely, not that nutrition was new, but nutrition's impact directly on the development of autoimmune disease or the ability to control it with nutrition was very new to me. And so for that, I'm like, if this is affecting me personally, I need to be the expert. And that's just my personality. So um, I made sure that I became the expert. Yes, there are other experts out there, but that doesn't mean that you can't learn it directly for yourself and then take that on and spread it on beyond yourself to others. I see a functional medicine physician now, and we still don't agree on everything, and so that's just the way it is, and everybody has their approach. So I had to understand what they were telling me too. And so I think that's what I like to do with my page is to I don't provide opinion whatsoever. It's just facts. And it's based off of studies so that people have them, they can review them, and they can take that back to their provider and ask questions, question them. Because your doctor, even if they're functionally medicine trained, they don't know everything, and the research is ongoing and it's continuous. And so every time a new study pops up, I make sure that I'm sending that out there into the universe so people are aware that it's there and it's available and you should educate yourself. So you should continuously be learning.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. So I actually, before exploring all the different modalities and getting my certifications, I actually also had some personal health issues that I would see doctors and even functional medicine doctors too. And it's really interesting to me that they couldn't get to the root of the problem. And like it took like a lot of trial and error and a lot of different practitioners that were way out of the box to kind of like get me on the right track. And I think it's like a combination, of seeking out experts, educating yourself, and also doing the work yourself. So not just hoping like you'll find an expert that will either give you a magic pill, or you'll have a magic session with them, but just like consistently showing up and doing the work, even if it's hard. And even if, yeah, I think especially if it's hard, that
It is
means
hard.
you have to do it, because if it's hard, there's a reason why there's a resistance. and you have to explore what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be hard. It's hard no matter what, right? These are like big changes that you have to make. That's why I said, like, up front, you just got to commit to it and then go with it. And know that there will be positive outcome in the end. But yeah, it's not easy. You know, that's I think the biggest thing is people think they want to do it. They start, and after a month, everyone's like, it's too much work. Forget it. I'll go back to my pill every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And like for me, I think my approach, because of my personal experiences, is to have all the options, to educate yourself on the pros and cons of the options. And then instead of going for the more extreme thing, I am a proponent of like, do the gentle things first. And then if that doesn't work, then you can consider the more invasive extreme things, because if you do it the other way around, you don't get a chance to undo it. So unless something is like super life or death, threatening that you need some invasive extreme care right away, I think delaying that option for last is like a really good plan, because that gives you more time to assess whether or not it's worth it for you to go that route.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And unfortunately, like, social media is good and bad for that. Because people complain like, oh, I have gut issues and I'm gonna do a parasite cleanse. I'm like, well, hold on. What do you eat? Like, what? And it's like, you realize, it's like they see somebody's story or read a post, and like, oh, that's me. I'm gonna go buy all those supplements and I'm gonna do that. But they're eating garbage and they're doing all these things. So it's like, it's just almost providing that direction on where to start is so key.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that you said earlier too about not knowing what source to trust, that is such a problem nowadays with social media and Google. Like, as much as I love Wikipedia, like, how do you go about trusting not only like what somebody wrote online, but even finding a provider whose viewpoints, you agree with, and like you were even mentioning that sometimes you disagree. So it's like, as a healthcare professional or as a patient, how do you, find that person that you want to work with that will really help you heal?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that there's a book, I haven't read it yet, but a friend of mine read it, but it's called The Death of the Expertise. And it's really focused on the fact that anybody can be an expert now in social media. And it doesn't matter if you really have any credentials, because if you say what people want to hear, then that's who they're going to look to for help and support and whatever it may be. And it's amazing to me. Like, I don't want to call out certain books or people or whatever, but there are, they're not practitioners, but they're people kind of in the space that are providing information. They've written books. And I look at some of these books and I'm like, there's no references, there's no scientific reference, but millions of people are following and buying and it's just amazing to me that that's where it's sad also. Like, that's where we've become, because, not everything is one size fits all, and it can do more harm than good in the approach that people take. And so, I mean, I don't know how to fix that. I don't know that we can. I think we focus on the environment before we focus on that, because I think that's quite a lost cause at this point.
Yeah.
But people just need to be aware of it, right? You need to look for people's credentials and understand, like, what does it mean to be an expert? And, are people focused on opinions or facts? And I think that's key.
Yeah. Can you share us like the few top tips that helped you personally with your Hashimoto's, that you found had the most impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, from a diet standpoint, avoiding gluten, dairy, and soy were like the top 3 allergens that, I needed to eliminate to just kind of reduce that inflammatory process going on. Another was, vitamin D. my vitamin D levels were so low. And we know that vitamin D plays like an intricate role in so much, not just thyroid function, but, there's vitamin D receptors all over the body. And, vast majority of individuals, especially if you live, in certain areas, you're deficient. And it doesn't matter how long you sat in the sun in the summertime, you're going to be deficient, a month later. It just doesn't work that way. So vitamin D is a big one. Diet, sleep, and again, another one. Like there's people, I think, underestimate the importance of getting a good night's sleep. And 8 to 9 hours. So like for me personally, I eliminated any TV watching. Like I'm in bed by 9 every night, and I need that sleep. And when you think about sleep, it's regenerative, right? Like we need it to be able to just regenerate and recover for the day. And that's almost when we go back to our hormones, it's our body's ability also to kind of get our hormones, let everything kind of relax. And so that when we awake, that our hormones are spiking and we're getting ready for the day and they're all communicating with each other to keep us going. So sleep is so key. I never thought that yoga would have such an effect. But doing yoga 3 times a week, and unfortunately with the pandemic, I had to couldn't go to the studio. I get it in and I kind of hope it's just not the same. So it's sad. But I saw a reduction in my antibody levels after starting yoga consistently, which was like a shock to me. And I was like, oh, wow. And there are so many studies out there that support meditation and yoga and actually have a direct impact on reducing inflammatory cytokines, within the body. So just recognizing that and kind of just calmly relaxing that breath, kind of turning off your nervous system to just relax and calm down. That's key. So what did I talk about? So I'll include that in exercise, diet, vitamin D is a big one. What else did I say? No, I can't remember. Oh, sleep. Sleep is huge. Yeah, I think those are kind of the main, it's a lot for somebody to take in. There's so much more. I take other supplements too, but I could go on and on and on. But just understanding what nutrient deficiencies impact thyroid health and, checking levels to make sure to see where you're at, see where you're deficient. Eliminating as much as you can those environmental toxins. I don't eat processed foods hardly at all. If I go to the grocery store, 90% of the food goes in the refrigerator. Things like that. Those are kind of simple. No. They're hard for some people, right? But to me, they're have now become the norm. It's just normal. I can't even get myself to buy certain things, and even if I'll see, the line outside of McDonald's or whatever. And I look at it, and it's not to judge anybody, but now that I know so much about what's in these foods and the chemicals and what they actually do to the body, I can't even imagine hurting my body that way. It's just, I can't do it. I can't even fathom it. So I think you can get to that point, and you get to that point when you understand and when you have more knowledge. And so that's really why I went back to school. And that's why I try to push people to learn and to understand and to give them the facts, because I've learned that when I'm providing, patient consults or whatever it is, counseling, if people actually understand the why behind it, then they're more likely to commit to it. And so if you just tell somebody to do something, yeah, whatever. But let me tell you why you need to do it. That's when you get somebody to actually commit to it. And so that's what I try to do. And that's what I've done for myself and how I've been able to be so successful in committing to this kind of lifestyle. Because some people say, oh, it's so hard. How do you do that? And then the other rule I try to tell people is just focus on an 80-20, you don't have to be 100%, but try to do it 80% of the time and you'll be good.
Yeah, I love that advice. The 80-20 especially is so good because you don't have to be so strict on yourself, because sometimes you just, you like can drive yourself crazy and spike your sympathetic tone even more and like get, you know, your adrenaline flowing. If you're feeling guilty or, you know, feeling ashamed of yourself or judging yourself, and, you know, you're making it even worse than if you had just like relaxed and just like allowed yourself this whatever exception to the rule. So like, I think it's called orthorexia, right? If somebody's just like wants to be properly, you know, taking care of themselves or eating a certain way all the time, and then that could just drive us crazy. So
Yeah.
focusing on just the things that you can control, and even allowing some wiggle room to make mistakes or to go outside the box is okay. So it's like human to do that. You can't be a robot. So
Absolutely.
giving yourself a little grace, even with the right protocol, is nice. And then the sleep, I so agree too. I think I keep trying to go to sleep at 9, and this week I actually went to sleep at 9 once, and it was such a great night. It was the next day was way better than it was when I don't go to sleep at 9. So it definitely sounds simple, and people are like, really, I'm paying for your consult for you to tell me to like go to sleep earlier. But I mean, it works, and it does reset you and regenerate, allows your organs to properly get ready and reset for the next day. Because if you're overburdening them and making them work at hours when they're not supposed to be, because we are creatures of rhythm, and we have cycles of, like you were saying, the spikes have to spike at a certain way, and then they have to fall at a certain way. And if we just mess them up with TV and blue light and activities at different times that our body doesn't naturally like tend to do it at that time, then we will kind of mess with our hormones. And as you were saying, hormones are super sensitive. So it's like they have to be at the exact proper, you know, proportions and levels. And even just like messing them up a little bit is actually going to wreak havoc on your body. So it's super important. And vitamin D, as you mentioned, it almost is like a hormone. You know, the structure is super similar to a hormonal structure, like a steroid. And so it kind of plays that role. Like, even though we call it a vitamin, it actually functions like this messenger and a cofactor in so many things that we're just recently like uncovering and learning about. In my own practice, I really focus on gut health for any kind of autoimmune, you know, dysfunction or any kind of immune things. Period. So, is that something that you found with? I know you mentioned eliminating triggers and inflammatory foods, but what else do you do to support the gut?
Yeah, yeah, gut health is obviously huge. I'm actually right now creating a gut healing protocol, um, utilizing, eliminating inflammatory foods, but also utilizing certain supplements to regenerate your gut cell lining quicker, and probiotics being a key, obviously in that. So yes, I recommend everybody on a probiotic, but the key with a probiotic is also identifying the right probiotic, for what you're trying to and a high quality probiotic. But at the same time, you have to recognize that you really can't ever get off a probiotic. So most studies with probiotics show that once you stop them, then they don't permanently reinoculate the gut. So it's kind of a staple to be on. And unfortunately, we've been on years and years of antibiotics and different exposures, and we've also permanently altered our gut, in a certain way. And so it's almost like, okay, you have to kind of get on a probiotic and even prebiotics, right? So focusing in on the foods that feed that bacteria to help it grow. Um, those are obviously key when we relate to gut health. There's other supplements and measures that can be done, obviously patient specific, but a probiotic is pretty staple, right? Like that we should take from an immune standpoint too, right? So we know that 70% of our immune system starts in the gut. So If we're putting in garbage and we're not giving it what it needs and it doesn't have that healthy bacteria to flourish, then the output is going to be negative, right? So it's just what you get in, what you get out, what you put in. So
Yeah, absolutely. I know. And I always find it so interesting with the probiotics that what is it that makes us as a host, not be able to kind of like make that species viable again? Like, why do we need to keep
yeah,
ingesting it, and why can't it find a permanent home? Because, bacteria could just multiply and grow and stuff like that. So it's very interesting. Like, I think the next focus should be like, how do we create such a hospitable environment for the beneficial organisms so they actually like want to stay there, and we don't have to keep on re-inoculating all the time. So I would love to hear more studies and data on that.
for sure. Yeah, I think a big focus right now is on like fecal transplants, and that's really the only way you can permanently re-inoculate, which who knows, that could be more widely available in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that is showing great results. Obviously, I think it needs to be done in a very like lab environment with like everything else being sterile, because a lot of things can go wrong. But and it does sound crazy, but it's giving us great results.
It is. Yep.
Because it's like, instead of isolating things and putting it down your whole, acidic tract, it's actually going to the direction where it's much closer to your colon, and then it's giving you like everything broad spectrum that already exists in another like healthy individual. So it is a much more holistic way to approach it, but it's not everybody will want to do it that way.
Well, it's not widely available either, right? Like we can't all just go do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. All right. Well, if you just have like one more minute left, I have a few rapid round questions for you.
sure.
Okay. So, number one, what's your number one advice for someone to improve their quality of life?
Just have a positive outlook on it, so it doesn't have to be perceived negatively. Like you can take something negative, make it positive, and you'll see a positive outcome in the end.
Yeah. Something that you said before, it's like no matter what, commit to something and it will turn out good. I love that mindset. And I think like just know that even if it doesn't give you 100% results, at least you'll learn from it. And it's just going to be a lesson to how you can get to your result.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Number two, what is your favorite hobby?
Oh, I love running. I'm a runner, so that's something that people are surprised by I enjoy doing. But overall, exercise in general, that's my thing.
Yeah. And yoga. So all
Yeah,
good choices. All right. And number three, what's your favorite beverage?
water, water, all
Yeah,
day water.
I actually have water here too.
Yeah, lots of water, water and tea. And now I've gotten one of my New Year's resolution was to drink more tea, so I have accomplished that this year. I drink a lot of tea now too, but water for sure.
Nice. Awesome. All right. And finally, please tell the listeners how they can find you, get in touch with you, and keep in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on both Instagram or Facebook at DrAutoimmunegirl. Also have a website, DrAutoimmunegirl.com, where I also link other podcasts I've been on with different topics. I have a blog on there, and you can sign up for upcoming newsletter that I'm developing, and just stay in the know of, future developments and things that I'll share that will help you take control of your health.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us, and I look forward to keeping in touch.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Raw Fork podcast, and I truly hope that you enjoyed it and learned something from it. If you did enjoy it, please don't hesitate to leave us a 5-star rating and a short, sweet review so that other listeners can find us across podcast platforms. To get in touch with me, you can go to rawfork.com or email me directly at marina@rawfork.com. Thank you, and I hope to see you back here next week.